The ship was bigger than any city T had ever seen. It floated in the darkness of space like a small moon made of gold and glass. The Velen called it the Eternal Dawn, and they had built it 3,000 years ago just to show everyone how powerful they were. T stood at the window of his small transport vessel and watched the massive ship grow larger as they approached. Behind him, Yuna was checking her uniform for the 10th time. "Stop staring at it," she said. "You'll make them think we're impressed." "I am impressed," T replied quietly. "There's no shame in that." Yuna walked over to stand beside him. She was younger than him by 5 years, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been assigned as the cultural attaché for this mission, which meant her job was to make sure the humans didn't accidentally insult anyone. Given what they were walking into, T thought she had the harder job. "The Velan have been in space for 10,000 years, Yuna said. "We've been out here for 200. They see us as children." "Then we'll behave like adults," T said. "That's all we can do." Their transport docked at one of the Eternal Dawn's many landing bays. Admiral D was waiting for them with 6 soldiers in dress uniforms. The admiral was an old man with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had commanded human fleets for 30 years, and T had never once seen him smile. "The other delegations have already arrived," Admiral D said as they walked through the gleaming corridors. 12 species in total. We're the last." "Fashionably late?" Yuna asked. "No, they sent our invitation late. We almost didn't make it in time." T said nothing, but he understood. The Velen hadn't wanted humans here at all. They had only invited them because refusing would have looked bad. A courtesy invitation, nothing more. The corridors of the Eternal Dawn were wide enough for 3 vehicles to drive side by side. The walls were covered in art that was older than human civilization. Velen attendants in flowing robes walked past them without a second glance, their tall bodies moving with a grace that made humans look clumsy. They arrived at the Grand Hall, and T had to stop himself from gasping. The room was enormous. Thousands of beings from different worlds filled the space, their voices creating a low hum that vibrated in T's chest. Floating platforms carried important guests above the crowd. Light came from nowhere and everywhere at once, making everything glow. At the far end of the hall, raised on a platform of white crystal, sat the Velen royal family. The emperor was ancient. His skin was pale blue, almost white, and his eyes held the weight of centuries. Beside him sat 2 princes and a princess, all young by Velen standards, all beautiful in the strange way that Velen were beautiful. T noticed the princess immediately. She was the youngest, maybe 19 in human years, though Velen aged differently. She wore a crown of floating lights and a dress that seemed to be made of liquid silver. She was watching the crowd with obvious boredom, occasionally whispering to her attendants and laughing at private jokes. "That's Princess Rhea," Yuna whispered. "3rd in line for the throne, first time attending a summit." "She looks thrilled to be here," T observed. "She's young. This is probably boring for her." A Velen official approached them. He was tall and thin, with the formal manner of someone who had spent centuries in royal courts. His name was Nal, and he served as the high advisor to the emperor. "Welcome, human delegation," Nal said. His voice was smooth and cold. "We are pleased you could join us." T gave a respectful nod. Not a bow. Humans bowed to no one, but they showed respect to those who earned it. "Thank you for the invitation. We're honored to be here." Nal's eyes flickered briefly. He had noticed the nod instead of the bow, but he said nothing, only gesturing toward the seating area. "Your places have been arranged according to the Galactic contribution score. Please follow me." They walked through the crowd. T noticed that other species moved aside for the Velen official, their heads lowering in submission. Some of them looked at the humans with curiosity. Others looked at them with something like pity. Their seats were at the very back of the hall. Yuna's jaw tightened. We can barely see the royal platform from here." "It's fine," T said. "It's an insult." "It's expected." T sat down in his assigned seat. The chair was uncomfortable, clearly designed for a different body type. "They rank species by what they've given to the galaxy. We're newcomers. We haven't had time to give much." "We fought the Keth for 11 years, Una said, her voice hard. "We bled for species that didn't even send help. That counts for nothing." "Apparently not." Admiral D took his seat without complaint. The old man had seen worse insults in his lifetime. This was nothing. The banquet began. Servants brought food from 100 different worlds. Music played from instruments that humans had no names for. Important delegates gave speeches about cooperation and unity, and the royal family nodded along as if they actually cared. T ate quietly and watched everything. He watched the way other species approached the royal platform, bowing so low their heads nearly touched the ground. He watched the way the emperor acknowledged them with the smallest movement of his hand, as if their attention was barely worth his time. He watched the princess laughing with her friends, not even pretending to pay attention. And he watched the other humans at his table. They were diplomats and soldiers, scientists and engineers. They had traveled across the stars to be here, hopping to build bridges with the older species. They had dressed in their best uniforms and learned proper etiquette and prepared thoughtful speeches. And they had been placed at the back of the room, like servants waiting for scraps. Una leaned close to T. "How do you stay so calm?" "Practice," he said, "and perspective." "What kind of perspective?" T looked around the magnificent hall. 3,000 years ago, when the Velen were building this ship, my ancestors were just learning to farm. They had nothing. No technology, no power, no knowledge of the stars, but they survived. They grew. They learned. He turned to face her. "Give us another 3,000 years. Let's see who's sitting at the back then." Una smiled despite herself. "That's a long time to wait." "Humans are patient. We have to be." The banquet continued late into the night. No one from the royal family spoke to the human delegation. No one of importance even looked their way. When it was finally over, T stood up and stretched his tired muscles. Tomorrow, the real negotiations would begin. Tomorrow, he would speak for humanity in front of species that had been ruling the stars since before humans discovered fire. He wasn't nervous. He had faced worse odds before. He just hoped they would listen. The negotiation chamber was a circle of white stone, with seats rising up like steps in every direction. Each species had their own section, marked by flags and symbols that T didn't recognize. In the center was a speaking platform where delegates would present their cases. T had spent the whole night preparing his speech. He had written it, deleted it, and written it again. Una had helped him remove anything that might sound too aggressive or too weak. Admiral D had reviewed it for military accuracy. By morning, they had something they were proud of. The human delegation took their seats in the upper rows, far from the center. Below them, the more important species sat in comfort, their seats cushioned and their views unblocked. Princess Rhea was there, sitting in a private box with her attendants. She wore a different dress today, this one bright red like fresh blood. She was whispering to a young Velen female beside her, not paying attention to anything happening in the chamber. The emperor was not present. These negotiations were beneath him. Instead, his eldest son presided over the proceedings, a Velen prince named Kel who looked bored but at least pretended to listen. One by one, the species presented their cases. The Torani wanted exclusive rights to a trade route near their home system. They spoke for almost an hour, their voices high and musical, their arguments complicated. When they finished, Prince Kel nodded politely and made notes. The Meshi wanted permission to build stations in neutral territory. They were a merchant species, small and clever, and they made their case with impressive charts and projections. The chamber seemed interested. The Ven wanted hunting rights in a distant sector. The Palori wanted mining access. The Kresh wanted shipping lanes. Species after species came forward, each asking for something, each bowing deeply to the royal box before speaking. Then it was humanity's turn. T stood up and walked down to the speaking platform. He didn't bow. He gave a respectful nod to Prince Kel, then turned to face the chamber. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him. Most of them were curious. Some were hostile. A few were pitying. "Thank you for this opportunity," T began. His voice was calm and clear. "I will be brief." He presented humanity's request: equal passage rights through 3 trade routes that connected human space to the wider galaxy. They weren't asking for exclusive access. They weren't asking for special treatment. They just wanted the same rights that other species already had. "We offer fair trade terms," T continued. "We offer cooperation in scientific research. We offer our experience in defending against external threats." He paused, letting that last point sink in. Everyone in the room knew about the Keth Wars. Everyone knew that humans had held the line while others ran. "We ask for nothing more than a place at the table, equal treatment, mutual respect." He finished speaking in exactly 4 minutes. No dramatic pauses, no emotional appeals, just clear, honest terms. Silence filled the chamber. Prince Kel was actually sitting up straighter now, his boredom gone. High Advisor Null, standing nearby, had a thoughtful expression on his ancient face. Several delegates from other species were nodding slowly. Then a voice cut through the silence like a knife. "How quaint." Every head turned toward Princess Ria's box. She was standing now, a small smile on her perfect lips. Her attendants were trying to pull her back into her seat, but she ignored them. "The short-lived species wants to play merchant now," she continued, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. "The Velen had excellent projection when they wanted to be heard. Tell me, human, do your people still solve disputes by hitting each other with rocks? I've read that your kind hadn't discovered fire when my great-grandmother was born." Nervous laughter rippled through parts of the chamber. Some species found the joke funny. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. High Advisor Null closed his eyes briefly, his expression pained. Prince Kel opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to apologize, but Ria wasn't finished. "Honestly, it's adorable that you came all this way. Like a child showing up to an adult gathering with their little drawing. Very cute. But perhaps you should focus on learning to walk before you try to run with the real civilizations." More laughter now. The princess's attendants were giggling openly. Every human in the chamber went still. Yuna's hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had turned white. Admiral D's face was completely blank, which was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. Everyone watched T, waiting for his reaction. Would he argue? Would he defend humanity's honor? Would he list their achievements, their sacrifices, their contributions? Would he remind the princess that humans had died by the millions protecting species like hers from threats they couldn't handle alone? T looked at Princess Ria. For a long moment their eyes met. He studied her face the way a soldier studies a battlefield, taking in every detail. She was young. She was spoiled. She had never known hardship, never lost anything, never had to fight for survival. She didn't know what she was looking at. His expression showed nothing. Not anger, not hurt, not disappointment, not even contempt. Just calm assessment, like he was reading a report about something that didn't concern him. Then he turned away from her. He walked toward the exit. No rebuttal, no defense, no dramatic speech. He simply left. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. This had never happened before. No species had ever walked out of a Velen summit. It wasn't done. There were protocols, traditions, expectations. Yuna stood and followed him. Admiral D stood and followed. One by one, every member of the human delegation rose from their seats, and walked out of the chamber in perfect silence. Princess Rhea was still smiling, waiting for applause that didn't come. "Well," she said, looking around at the stunned faces, "I suppose they couldn't handle a little joke." No one laughed. High Advisor Null's voice was ice. "Everyone please take a brief recess. We will resume in 1 hour." The chamber began to empty, but the murmuring never stopped. Delegates whispered to each other in a dozen languages. Something had just happened. Something important. They weren't sure what, but they could feel it in the air. On the speaking platform, T's written proposal lay untouched where he had left it. Outside the chamber, the human delegation moved through the corridors of the Eternal Dawn in perfect formation. No one spoke. No one needed to. When they reached their ship, T finally stopped. He stood at the airlock for a long moment, looking back at the gleaming vessel that housed the galaxy's most powerful empire. "Sir," Yuna asked quietly. "Close all communication channels," T said. His voice was flat. "No responses to any messages, no negotiations, no contact." "For how long?" T didn't answer. He walked onto the ship, and the airlock closed behind him. The humans had come to the summit hopping to build bridges. They had dressed in their best clothes and prepared their best arguments. They had traveled across the stars to ask for nothing more than respect. And a 19-year-old princess had laughed in their faces. So they left. Because some insults don't deserve a response. Some people aren't worth the words. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. Let them wonder why. Let them worry about what comes next. Let them learn that human patience has limits. And when those limits are reached, humans don't shout, they don't threaten, they don't make speeches. They just go quiet. And in that silence, they decide what to do next. Princess Rhea returned to her quarters expecting praise. She had put the primitive species in their place. She had been clever and funny. Her friends had laughed, and that meant she had done well. But when she entered her private chambers, High Advisor Null was waiting for her. The old Velen stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. He did not turn around when she entered. He did not greet her with the usual respect. "Advisor Null," Rhea said cheerfully, "did you see how I handled those humans? They couldn't even. Do you have any idea what you've just done?" His voice was quiet, but something in it made Rhea stop moving. In 200 years of serving the royal family, Null had never spoken to any of them like that. "I made a joke," Rhea said, though her confidence was already fading. "They overreacted." "A joke?" Null finally turned around. His ancient eyes were cold. "You insulted an entire species in front of 12 galactic delegations. You mocked their intelligence, their history, their worth. You compared them to children playing at civilization. They are children. They've only been in space for 200 years. And in those 200 years, they have done more than the Palori did in their first 1,000. They have achieved more than the Meshi accomplished in 2,000. They have faced threats that would have destroyed other young species, and they survived through sheer determination." Rhea crossed her arms. "So they're lucky. That doesn't make them our equals." Null walked toward her slowly. Despite his age, there was strength in his movements. "Do you know why your father invited humans to this summit, even though he didn't want to? Because it would look bad if we didn't. Because he is afraid of them." Rhea laughed, "Afraid of those short-lived primitives." "Yes, and you should be too." Before Rhea could respond, the door opened and her brother walked in. Prince Kel looked worried, which was unusual. Kel was always calm, always in control. "The humans have gone silent," he said. "All communication channels are closed. Their ship is powering up its engines." Rhea shrugged. "So they're leaving. Good. They were boring anyway." "You don't understand." Kel's voice was sharp. "They're not just leaving, they're going quiet. Admiral D has positioned his fleet in a formation we've never seen before. Our analysts don't know what it means." It means they're scared and running away. No, Nal shook his head. It means they've made a decision. Humans don't posture, they don't threaten. When they go quiet, it means they've already decided what they're going to do and nothing will change their minds. Rhea felt the first real touch of worry. What could they possibly do? Their fleet is tiny compared to ours. Come with me, Nal said. Both of you, there's something you need to see. He led them through the winding corridors of the royal section to a private archive room. The walls were lined with data crystals containing information gathered over 10,000 years of Velan expansion. Nal activated a display screen. This is classified footage. Your father didn't want you to see it. He thought it might give you nightmares. Images began to play. The first recording showed a planet covered in fire. Ships filled the sky, thousands of them, moving in swarms that blotted out the sun. These were the Keth, a species of biological machines that consumed everything in their path. They had appeared suddenly 40 years ago and begun destroying everything they touched. The Keth Wars, Nal narrated. When the swarm first arrived, they attacked Palori space. The Palori fleet was destroyed in 3 days. The Palori government begged us for help. Did we send help? Kel asked quietly. We sent advisors, strategists. We watched from a safe distance and studied the enemy. The footage changed. Now it showed human ships engaging the Keth swarm. The human vessels were smaller, older, less advanced than any other fleet in the galaxy, but they weren't running. The humans had only been spacefaring for 160 years when the Keth reached their border, Nal continued. They were the youngest species in the affected region. They had the smallest fleet, the least resources, the least experience. On screen, a human carrier launched fighters directly into a Keth swarm. The fighters were torn apart almost immediately, but they took Keth ships with them. More human ships moved forward to fill the gaps. We expected them to retreat, to evacuate, to ask for help and wait for someone else to solve the problem. Nal paused. They didn't. The footage showed battle after battle, human ships exploding, human stations burning, human colonies being evacuated under fire. For 11 years, the humans held the line, alone. No one came to help them. The older species were too busy protecting themselves. We told ourselves that the humans would fall eventually, and then we would step in to contain the swarm. Rhea watched a human cruiser ram directly into a Keth command ship. Both vessels exploded in a ball of light. But they didn't fall, they adapted. They learned. They developed new weapons, new strategies, new ways of fighting, and slowly, impossibly, they began to win. The footage shifted to show the final battle of the Keth Wars. Human ships surrounded the last Keth hive. The fighting was brutal, desperate, endless. But when it was over, the Keth were destroyed. They lost 18 million people, Nal said quietly. 18 million humans died fighting an enemy that the rest of the galaxy was too afraid to face. And when it was over, they asked for nothing. No payment, no recognition, no apologies from the species that could have helped but didn't. Rhea's throat was dry. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Your tutors told you that humans were primitive and amusing. They didn't tell you about the siege of Station Myra, where 400 human soldiers held off a Keth assault for 9 days so that 2 million Palori refugees could escape. They didn't tell you that the human commander's last message was, "Tell them we held. Tell them we gave them time." Prince Kel's face was pale. Why didn't anyone tell us this? Because it's inconvenient. Because admitting that a young species saved the galaxy makes the older species look bad. Because your father didn't want you to respect humans too much. Nal turned off the display. But now you need to understand something important. He faced Rhea directly. The man you mocked today is named T. He served in the Keth Wars for 6 years. He lost his wife and daughter in a raid on his home colony. After the war ended, he was offered a general's rank and command of an entire fleet. Do you know what he did? Rhea shook her head. He requested a transfer to the diplomatic corps. His transfer request had one line: "I'm done with killing. I want to find another way." The princess felt something cold settle in her stomach. He came to this summit hopping to build bridges. He prepared a fair proposal asking for nothing but equal treatment. He dressed in a simple uniform with no medals, though he earned dozens. Nal's voice was sharp now. "And you laughed at him. You compared his species to children playing with rocks." "I didn't know." "That's exactly the problem. You didn't know and you didn't bother to find out. You assumed that because they're young, they must be inferior. You assumed that because they're short-lived, they must be unimportant." Nal walked toward the door, then stopped. "The humans have a saying, 'Still waters run deep.' They don't rage, they don't threaten. They go quiet and they think and they remember. And when they finally act, they act with purpose." He looked back at the princess. "You've just made the entire human species remember the Velen Empire, not as allies, not as partners, as the people who laughed at them when they asked for respect." "What will they do?" "I don't know, and that's what frightens me." Nal left the room, leaving Rhea alone with her brother and the weight of what she had done. 3 days passed in tense silence. The summit continued without the humans. Trade negotiations moved forward. Agreements were discussed and signed. On the surface, everything seemed normal. But nothing felt right. Delegates from other species kept glancing toward the empty human section. Conversations would stop suddenly when certain topics came up. The Palori ambassador, whose people had been saved by humans during the Keth Wars, refused to attend any session where Princess Rhea was present. The human ship remained docked at the Eternal Dawn, its communication channels still closed. Admiral D's fleet floated nearby in perfect formation, engines warm but weapons cold. They weren't threatening anyone. They were just waiting. High Advisor Nal spent most of his time in private meetings with other species representatives. What he heard worried him greatly. The Torani were reconsidering their trade agreement with the Velan. The Meshi had quietly asked about human shipping routes. The Palori had sent a formal complaint to the Emperor, criticizing the princess's behavior. "They're not angry at us because they like humans," Nal explained to Prince Kel. "They're worried because they don't know what humans will do next, and in politics, uncertainty is dangerous." Kel nodded slowly. "What do you suggest?" "Someone needs to apologize, officially, publicly." "My sister will never agree to that." "Then she may have just cost us alliances that took centuries to build." Meanwhile, Princess Rhea couldn't sleep. Every night she lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment in her head. The laughter, the silence, the way T had looked at her before he turned away. He hadn't been angry, that was the strange part. She had expected anger, she knew how to handle anger, but his eyes had shown something else, something worse. He had looked at her like she wasn't worth being angry at. On the third night, Rhea accessed the classified archives and searched for everything about T. What she found kept her awake until morning. His full name was T. Min Su, born on a colony world called New Busan, married young to a woman named Hana. They had a daughter named Su Jin. The Keth had attacked New Busan when Su Jin was 4 years old. Rhea watched the footage from that day. Emergency broadcasts, evacuation ships launching under fire, a young man with T's face running through burning streets, carrying his daughter in his arms while his wife ran beside him. They didn't make it to the evacuation ship in time. A Keth fighter had destroyed it before they could board. More footage showed T enlisting in the military 3 days later. He was assigned to a frontline unit. His records showed steady promotions, not because he sought them, but because he kept surviving when others didn't. Battle after battle, year after year, he became known as the Silent Soldier because he never celebrated victories and never complained about defeats. He just kept fighting. When his wife died during a raid on a medical station 2 years into the war, he didn't take leave. He requested immediate transfer to a combat unit. When his daughter died of injuries from that same raid a week later, he still didn't stop. He just became quieter. By the war's end, he had earned every medal the human military could offer. He had been promoted so many times that they ran out of ranks to give him. And then, when it was over, he had walked away from all of it. "I'm done with killing. I want to find another way." Rhea read those words again and again. This man had lost everything. He had spent 6 years killing to protect a galaxy that didn't care about his people. He had watched his wife and daughter die. He had earned the right to be bitter, to be angry, to hate everyone who had failed humanity when they needed help most. Instead, he had chosen peace. He had put on a simple uniform with no medals and traveled across the stars to ask for nothing more than respect. And she had laughed at him. On the fourth day, a message came through back channels. Admiral D had contacted Null directly. The message was short. "We're not angry, we're disappointed. Humanity has extended its hand to the galaxy many times. We've bled for species who couldn't be bothered to learn our names. We asked for nothing but respect. Your princess made the Empire's feelings clear. We understand now. We won't forget." Null read the message to the royal family in private chambers. The Emperor's face showed nothing, but his hands tightened on the arms of his throne. "What do they mean they won't forget?" Rhea asked quietly. "Exactly what it sounds like," Null replied. "Humans have long memories. They remember those who helped them, and they remember those who hurt them. The Palori gave them shelter during the darkest days of the Keth Wars, and humans have repaid that kindness 100 times over. But the Velen—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "They're not going to attack us," Prince Kel said. "They don't have the power." "No, they won't attack, but they also won't help. The next time a crisis threatens this region of space, the humans will remember who mocked them, and they'll remember who stood by while it happened." The Emperor finally spoke. His voice was old and tired. "What would you have me do, Null? Apologize to these children?" "I would have you recognize that those children held the line against the Keth when we were too careful to fight. I would have you recognize that underestimating them is more dangerous than overestimating them. And I would have you recognize that your daughter's words may have consequences that last longer than any trade agreement we sign at this summit." The room fell silent. Rhea stood in the corner, trying to make herself invisible. She had wanted to be clever. She had wanted to impress her friends. She had wanted to show everyone that she was witty and sharp and worthy of her royal blood. Instead, she had proven that she was exactly what she had accused the humans of being: a child playing at games she didn't understand. That night, she made a decision. She didn't ask permission. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She simply put on a plain dress, removed her floating crown, and walked alone through the corridors of the eternal dawn. The guards at the human ship looked surprised to see her. "I want to speak with Ambassador T," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "Please." The guards exchanged glances. One of them spoke into a communication device. A long moment passed. Then the airlock opened. "He'll see you," the guard said. "Follow me." Rhea stepped onto the human ship, leaving behind everything she knew about how the galaxy worked. It was time to learn what she had failed to understand. The human ship was smaller than Rhea had expected. The corridors were narrow, the walls were plain metal, and everything smelled of recycled air and machine oil. There was no art on the walls, no floating platforms, no crystal or gold. It was functional, efficient, human. The guard led her through the ship without speaking. Crew members passed by, giving her curious glances but saying nothing. She noticed that none of them bowed. None of them stepped aside for her. They simply walked around her as if she were anyone else. She didn't know how to feel about that. They arrived at an observation deck. The room was small and dark, lit only by the stars visible through the large window. T sat alone in a simple chair, his back to the door, watching the distant lights of the galaxy. "Leave us," he said without turning around. The guard nodded and left. The door closed behind him. Rhea stood in the darkness, all her prepared speeches forgotten. She had practiced what she would say. She had memorized perfect sentences, diplomatic phrases, formal apologies. Now, standing in this quiet room with this quiet man, none of them seemed right. So she said nothing. Minutes passed. T didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there watching the stars. Finally, Rhea found her voice. "I was cruel." T still didn't turn around. "I was ignorant. I didn't see you as a person. I didn't see your species as people. I saw you as something beneath me, something to mock." She took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry." Silence. "Not because of consequences. Not because my father is angry or because other species are upset. I'm sorry because I was wrong." More silence. Rhea felt tears building in her eyes, which surprised her. Velen royalty didn't cry. She had been taught that since birth. "I read about you," she continued. "About your wife, your daughter. About what you did during the war and what you chose to do after. I read about the soldiers who died at Station Myra, sending messages to people they loved while the Keth broke through the doors." Her voice cracked. "My tutors told me humans were primitive, amusing, short-lived creatures who hadn't earned their place in the galaxy. But they didn't tell me about the 18 million who died fighting a war no one helped them win. They didn't tell me about the commanders who stayed behind so others could escape. They didn't tell me about the man who lost everything and then asked to find another way." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm 19 years old. That's young, even for humans. I've never lost anyone. I've never had to fight for anything. I've never known what it feels like to watch your world burn while the rest of the galaxy looks away." T finally spoke. "Then you're lucky." His voice was tired, not angry, not cold, just tired. "Do you know why I walked away?" Rhea shook her head, then realized he couldn't see her. "No." "Because I've learned that you can't make someone respect you with words." T slowly stood and turned to face her. In the dim light of the stars, he looked older than his record suggested. "You can only show them who you are through actions, and if they refuse to see, then words are wasted on them." He walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. "I've spent my whole life proving humanity's worth to a galaxy that didn't want to see it. We fight their wars. We protect their borders. We die for species that don't even bother to learn our names. And when we ask for a seat at the table, they laugh at us." His eyes met hers. "I'm tired of proving. I thought maybe I'd try just being. Let people decide for themselves what we're worth." Rhea wanted to look away, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "What can I do? How can I fix this?" T studied her for a long moment. She felt like he was reading her soul, measuring her worth the way she had once measured his. "Grow up," he said finally. "Rule well someday. Remember that every species you meet has bled and loved and lost. We're not so different, princess. We're all just trying to survive." He extended his hand toward her. Rhea stared at it. She knew what this gesture meant. Humans offered their hands in peace. It was how they greeted friends, sealed agreements, forgave enemies. She took his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, the hand of a soldier who had learned to be something else. "This doesn't mean everything is fixed," T said. "Trust takes time to build and seconds to destroy. Your words hurt more than you know. Some of my people will never forgive the Velen for what you said." "I understand. But it's a start." He released her hand. "Now go back to your ship. Tell your father that the humans will return to negotiations tomorrow. Tell him we still want what we asked for. Nothing more, nothing less." Rhea nodded. She started to leave, then stopped. "Ambassador T." "Yes." "You could have destroyed us, our reputation, our alliances. You could have told everyone what happened and turned the galaxy against us. Why didn't you? T turned back to the window and the stars beyond. Because that's not the human way. We don't destroy. We endure. We remember. And sometimes when people are willing to learn, we forgive. Rhea left the ship with tears still wet on her cheeks. 30 years later, the galaxy had changed. Empress Rhea of the Velen Empire stood before the Galactic Assembly. The chamber was packed with representatives from over 50 species. Floating cameras broadcast her image to 100 worlds. Beside her stood an elderly human man with gray hair and kind eyes. Ambassador T had served in the diplomatic corps for 3 decades. This was his final year before retirement. Rhea addressed the gathered species. 30 years ago, I made a remark that could have cost my people everything. I was young, arrogant, and blind to anything beyond my own small world. A man I insulted taught me something that day, something that changed my life. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. True strength isn't in making others feel small, it's in lifting them up. True power isn't in mocking those who are different, it's in learning from them. She gestured to T. This man could have been my enemy. I gave him every reason to hate me and my people. Instead, he chose to teach me, to show me what humanity really was, not with speeches or threats, but with patience, with dignity, with grace. She announced the Rhea Accords, a new framework for interspecies relations. Equal treatment for all species regardless of age or development. Shared resources during crises. Mutual defense against external threats. Humanity was listed as a founding partner. The assembly erupted in applause. Species that had looked down on humans for centuries now stood to honor them. The galaxy had finally learned what Rhea had learned 30 years ago. After the ceremony, T found a quiet balcony overlooking the stars. Yuna was there, her hair silver now, her sharp tongue mellowed by decades of diplomacy. She smiled when she saw him. Not bad for a primitive species, she said. Not bad at all. A few minutes later, Empress Rhea joined them. She was older now, lines on her face that hadn't been there before, but her eyes were different than they had been at 19. Wiser, kinder. You could have destroyed us back then, she said to T. Our arrogance, our cruelty. You had every right to hold a grudge. T shook his head. That's not the human way. We don't destroy, we endure, we remember. He smiled, the first real smile Rhea had ever seen from him. And sometimes we forgive. He looked out at the stars, countless worlds, countless species, all sharing the same sky. You know what makes us human? He asked. It's not our technology, it's not our military, it's not how fast we learn or how far we've come. What is it? It's that we never stop hopping. We lose everything and we keep going. We get knocked down and we get back up. We meet people who hate us and we give them the chance to change. He turned to face the Empress. You gave humans a reason to hate the Velen, but we chose to see you as someone who could grow, and you did. Rhea felt tears in her eyes again, just like that night 30 years ago. Thank you, she whispered. T nodded and turned back to the stars. Somewhere out there, new species were just beginning their journey into the cosmos. They would face challenges, make mistakes, meet older civilizations who would look down on them. And maybe, just maybe, they would meet a human who would show them another way. That was the human legacy, not conquest, not power, not revenge. Just the simple, stubborn belief that anyone could change. Even a 19-year-old princess who once laughed at the wrong people. Even a galaxy that had forgotten how to see. Even the universe itself. One patient step at a time,